Hi everyone, it's Marianne. Welcome to my Wasteless Life. In this video, let's talk about the care and propagation of the Monstera standleyana. Thank you so much for joining me today, and if you're new, this is my Wasteless Life, where I take you along my plant and sustainable lifestyle journey and share with you some of my tips and tricks along the way. And if this is your first time watching me, I'm currently doing a Monstera series on my channel, and if you haven't seen it yet, go check out my video on the popular varieties of the Monstera plant and what is currently in my collection. And I'm also doing specific care and propagation guides for the ones that I do have in my collection, and I already did one for the Monstera adansonii as well as the Monstera siltepecana, and today we're going to talk about the Monstera standleyana. This is currently the Monstera standleyana I have. This is the Monstera ALBO, but I do have a Monstera AUREA propagation that I recently added to this one, and this one is currently in LECA. Additionally, I do have propagations of both the ALBO and AUREA Monstera standleyana, which also I'm going to talk about more in detail later on. In comparison to Monstera varieties that used to be referred to as rare or uncommon, but now it can be easily found in plant shops, in nurseries, greenhouses, and even in big box stores like the Monstera adansonii, Monstera siltepecana, and the Monstera Peru, the Monstera standleyana, at least in my experience, is still very hard to find at local plant shops, nurseries, greenhouse, and especially not at big box stores. I did get my Monstera standleyana through trades. Like with my Monstera ALBO that I have in here, this started out as a 2 or 3 leaf cutting that I got at a plant swap earlier this year at H Street Farms. And once it grew, I traded off a top cutting for the Monstera AUREA, which I have propagating, and now I have added one of the cuttings over here, and I still have a couple of them propagating in here. And as mentioned, I did get my plants through trades, but as far as I know, when it comes to pricing, cuttings of this can still cost a little under $100, and if you get a plant that's already established like this one, this could easily cost a little over $100 still. But again, those prices are subjective to where you are located. It might be a lot cheaper or more common where you're at, but in my area, it's still quite uncommon and still can get a bit pricey. And when it comes to the care of the Monstera standleyana, I actually find this the easiest care among all of my Monstera plants, at least in comparison with the adansonii and the siltepecana, which you know if you watch my previous videos that I had trouble with when I first got them. So with this, granted I only had this for a few months, few weeks even, but I never really had any problems with it once I brought them back home. They easily adjusted to LECA when I converted them once they grew enough roots, and after that they just pretty much took off. And with the Monstera standleyana, I do prefer giving it a moss pole to climb on, just like with my Monstera adansonii wide form. This one is currently in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet, and the propagations is in my prop station, but I try not to get it too close to the grow light because I found that the Monstera standleyana do burn its leaves very easily compared to other Monstera plants. I do have grow lights in my IKEA greenhouse cabinet, but they are the purple lights, so they don't burn the leaves. But this one that I have in my prop station, it is under a full spectrum light, and if it's too close to the light, it does burn the leaves. So I try not to get it too close to the grow lights as much as possible. But if you're relying on natural light, I would only try to give them medium to bright indirect light, and I will also be careful with giving it bright light because it can cause burning of the leaves. And when it comes to watering, my only experience with the Monstera standleyana is having it in LECA. So what I do is just to make sure that it always have a water reservoir and flush it every now and then. So far, I haven't had any pest issues with my Monstera standleyana. Even when I had that huge fungus gnat infestation inside my IKEA greenhouse cabinet because of my Monstera siltepecana, this one wasn't affected at all. I also haven't experienced any root rot with this one. Even when I transitioned it to LECA, it didn't really experience any shock. While there might be a little bit of root rot, it wasn't so severe that it was concerning or I had to start all over again with the plant. I do find though that the stems break easily. That's the reason I ended up with this Monstera ALBO cutting in the first place, because I accidentally knocked it and the vine did break off pretty easily, which was kind of surprising. And when it did break off, it did produce 2 growth points. So while this one is still a top cutting, the other top cutting, as mentioned earlier, I did cut that off to do a plant trade for the Monstera standleyana AUREA, and that is the one that has the more ALBO variegation. With the Monstera AUREA, however, you can see with this cutting that I got, the variegation is a lot more prominent. I'm not sure if that is the nature of the ALBO versus the AUREA, because I have seen people with the Monstera standleyana also start out with leaves that have barely any variegation in it, but as it grows, it would produce even leaves that are purely white. But when it comes to propagating the Monstera standleyana, that's when I start to find it a little bit challenging. Like I said, with the accidental cuttings that I made of the Monstera ALBO, this one has been propagating for, I would say, more than a month, close to 2 months right now. And at first, it was so hard to get it to first even root at all, and second, the stem that it had, or the part of the vine that it had, it just continued to rot and rot and rot and rot, and there's nothing really I could do to stop it. I tried to let the vine callus first before I put it in water, but that didn't really quite work. But the funny thing is, once it's rotted up just underneath the node, it stopped the rotting and it started producing those roots. So that is kind of funny. I'm not really sure if it's something that I did different or the cuttings just finally adjusted. And I just noticed actually with this one, it is already starting out to push a new growth. And this one hasn't yet. With this one, I actually was really surprised that it still grew roots because it basically has 0 nodes. Well, it has a node underneath here, but this rotted all the way up to the node and it's just started growing roots over here. So that is actually pretty amazing. And this one is a Monstera AUREA. I did get this as a 3-leaf cutting. So initially it was attached to this leaf that I have potted up together with the ALBO, and then I did cut it off once it produced a lot of roots, and I wanted to see if I could try to root this one as well. And so far it is producing a root, and the rotting did continue as far up as it did with the Monstera ALBO. So hopefully that works. And if you also plan to have your propagations in leca or in any soil medium, I do prefer to wait until my propagations have grown secondary roots before I put them into any medium. So just in case of any shock transplant and they lose some of the roots due to rotting or whatever issues, there's still a lot of roots for it to help it recover. Because like with this one, it does have long roots already, but it still doesn't have secondary roots. So if I put this in leca or in any other growing medium or soil, it might survive, but there's also a chance that it wouldn't. Just to err on the side of caution, I do wait for secondary roots before I transplant any of my propagations, especially propagations like this one that are pretty uncommon or very hard to find or pretty expensive if I do purchase them myself. So I try to be very careful when I'm transplanting my propagations from water to an actual growing medium. Yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, please leave it down in the comments. And if you have additional tips and tricks that I didn't mention in this video, please do share them down in the comments. And as mentioned, I do have a Monstera series going on from the video on the popular varieties of the Monstera plant and what's in my collection, as well as specific care and propagation guides for the Adansonii and the Siltepecana, and now for the standleyana. And I have a couple more coming up, so please do watch out for those. And all of those would be linked down in the description once they're up. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, please do subscribe. I come up with videos every week, and if you haven't yet, check out these videos up here. Until my next one, but until then, I see you, I appreciate you, take care of yourself and each other, and have a plentiful day. Bye!